At number 7, the 1962 Detroit Lions. They were first in yards per play, penalty yards, first downs, and rushing defense, and second in points and second in forcing fumbles. Now that is very noteworthy because the Packers and Bears also had phenomenal defenses at this time. They finished 11-3 and held opponents to 10 or less 7 times, never giving up more than 24. 2 of their 3 losses were 9-7 to the Packers and 3-0 to the Bears. This team also scored 5 defensive touchdowns and allowed only 6 rushing touchdowns. They had 5 players gain postseason honors, including 4 All-Pros: tackle Roger Brown, corner Night Train Lane, tackle Roger Brown, and linebacker Joe Schmid, along with Pro Bowl defensive tackle Alex Karras. At number 6, the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers. The greatest of all the great Steeler defenses. This is the 3rd team from the second coming of the Steel Curtain, and the best the Steelers ever produced. This team played opponents with a .526 winning percentage, which was the second highest of any team here. They were first in points, yards, rushing yards per carry, giving up only 3.3, and passing with an outstanding .8 yards per attempt, better than the next best team in 2008. They were second in total first downs given up. 8 times they held opponents to 10 or less. The most impressive thing about this defense was that they allowed 1.4 less yards per play than the league average, which ranks them among the top 3 all-time in that category. If they were not among the league leaders in most penalty yards, this defense would have been a notch or 2 higher on this elite list. This defense was led by 2 All-Pros, linebacker James Harris and safety Troy Polamalu, and Pro Bowl linebacker James Farrior. Now for your top 5. At number 5, the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, the 3rd of those great Raven defenses to make this list. They finished at 12-4. These Ravens are the only team to give up 1 or less touchdowns per game over a 16-game schedule, giving up exactly 16. They're the 4th team on this list so far of the 5 all-time to give up exactly 1 touchdown per game. This defense had a great playoff run, giving up only 24 points in 4 games. They're first in points, turnovers, penalty yards by almost 100, forcing fumbles, recording twice the league average, and rushing, allowing only 2.7 yards per carry. They were second in yards. Extremely consistent all year, they gave up more than 20 points only twice and had 4 shutouts. This defense allowed 10 or less points 11 times and only gave up 5 rushing touchdowns in a 16-game season. They had All-Pro linebacker Ray Lewis and Pro Bowlers safety Rod Woodson and tackle Sam Adams. At number 4, the 1963 Chicago Bears. The best of 5 Bears teams to appear on this list. The most points given up by this defense all year was 21, and only twice did they give up more than 17. Amazingly, 8 times in 14 games they held opponents to 7 or less points. They swept all the categories, being first in points, yards, turnovers, passing, and rushing, outshining those great Packer and Lion defenses of the era. These Bears created 54 turnovers, including 36 interceptions. They gave up 62 less points on the year than their nearest rival and allowed less than half the league average in total points. They finished 11-1-2, and they're led by 4 All-Pros, safety Rosie Taylor and Richard Pettibone, linebacker Joe Fortunato, and defensive end Doug Atkins, along with Pro Bowl linebacker Bill George. At number 3, the 1962 Green Bay Packers. Vince Lombardi's Packers were the dominant team of this era. The Pack won several championships, including the first 2 Super Bowls. They were great on offense and great on defense. This team also gave up exactly 1 touchdown per game, making them one of the 9 most successful in that category all time. For 8 straight years, from 1960 to 1967, the Packers had a top 3 rated defense, dropping as low as 3 only in 1967. They were first in points, turnovers, yards per play, interceptions, and passing, and second in total yards and first downs, and third against the run. They finished at 13-1 with 3 shutouts and held opponents to 10 or less 8 times. They also allowed only 4 rushing touchdowns. They were led by All-Pro linebacker Bill Forrest and 5 Pro Bowlers, linebacker Doug Cutie, tackle Harry Jordan, end Willie Davis, safety Willie Wood, and corner Herb Adderley. Now this is the place where the second big jump comes in the scores of these top 20 teams. And this jump is twice as big as the jump between number 21 and number 20. That also means that the third big jump is between this team and the top team. That means these top 2 teams are way, way above the rest of the competition. At number 2, the 1970 Minnesota Vikings. The 70 Vikes gave up only 10 touchdowns all season, the least per game in history after 1949. I started my study in 1950. They also scored 6 touchdowns. During the first half of the season, 7 games, the defense actually scored as many points as they gave up, 42-42. After subtracting the 28 points given up by the offense and special teams, this defense gave up only 8.1 points per game, second lowest in history. The defense led the league in points, yards, turnovers, penalty yards, and passing. They gave up 17 or more points only 3 times and never more than 20. They finished at 12-2 and gave up 10 or less points in 11 of 14 games. They were second in interceptions with 28 while allowing only 6 passing touchdowns, the best in history. This defense allowed 0.8 yards per play less than the next best team in the league, totaling 864 less total yards than the second place squad while defending 58 more plays. That also ranks by far the most impressive in league history. They were led by first-team All-Pros tackle Alan Page and end Carl Eller, with tackle Gary Larson and safety Carl Kosulke making the Pro Bowl. At number 1, the 1969 Minnesota Vikings. The Purple People Eaters were far and away the greatest defense of all time, and the 69 Vikes were the best of the best. In those 3 large gaps I was telling you about, the gap between number 2 and number 1 is 1.5 times greater than the gap between 21 and 20. During the process of finding the most fair formula to balance all the changes in the game from 1950 to date, I tried several different formulas before I found the right one. But there was one thing that never changed regardless of what formula I was using. The only team to come anywhere near the 69 Vikes was the 70 Vikes. When you subtract the points given up by the offense and the special teams, these Vikings gave up only 7.5 points per game, the lowest ever. This team led everyone on the list in points per play given up and the farthest below the league average in that category. Also, their 3.417 yards per play allowed was the lowest in history, and it was 1.465 better than the league average, also the best ever. They gave up only 12 touchdowns. That means they also gave up only 7 field goals, also another best ever. All 4 linemen on this team, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson, made the Pro Bowl, along with safety Paul Krause, with Alan Page being a first-team All-Pro. Page, Eller, and Marshall all recorded over 100 sacks in their careers, putting them in the top 40 all-time. Page was the most prolific defensive tackle ever in that category, recording 173, and being one of only 2 defensive tackles to ever get over 100. And just for good measure, Page also recorded more blocked kicks than any player in history. The Purple People Eaters also had a top 3 rated defense 7 out of 8 years from 1969 to 1976. being number 1 from 1969 to 1971, both of which are the best in the post-merger era. They were first in points, yards, first downs, interceptions, yards per carry, and passing, and second in turnovers. They gave up more than 14 points only once. They posted 2 shutouts and held opponents to 10 or less 9 times. This defense gave up just 105 points, which was just 7.5 points more than 1/3 the league average. Their 3.6 yards per pass attempt was 1.1 better than the second-place team in that category, both of which are the best ever. In their last 16 games, including the playoffs, the Vikings suffered just 2 losses. One, when the offense gave up 8 turnovers and a touchdown in a 10-3 loss to the Falcons, and in the Super Bowl when the offense and special teams gave up 5 turnovers. Interestingly enough, 3 of the 12 touchdowns this team gave up were thrown in the first game of the season by their future leader, Fran Tarkenton, when he was with the Giants. In the next 27 regular season games, one short of 2 full seasons, the Vikings gave up only 19 touchdowns. That's less than the vast majority of these top 51 defenses in history gave up in just 1 season. So far, I've mentioned 3 of the 4 teams in history that gave up less than 1 touchdown per game, those being the 69, 70, and 71 Vikings. But the other team in that category that did not make this list was also a Viking team. The 1973 Vikings gave up 13 touchdowns in a 14-game season. Now, you might ask why they didn't make this list, giving up only 13 touchdowns, and that would be a very good question. One that makes me question my own formula to some extent. But the 73 version of the Vikings gave up yards at a rate that was very average. And although they were second in points given up in a year that saw 3 teams make this top 51 list, they allowed 21 field goals. They were the epitome of the bend but don't break defense. There they are, the best of all time. Please give me your feedback or questions. I'd like to take a few moments to try and help correct what is, in my opinion, the worst oversight ever for the Hall of Fame. Jim Marshall started on defense in the NFL for 20 years. No one has ever done that. Jim Marshall was the captain and leader of the greatest defense that ever took the field. No one else can say that. Jim may have been only the 3rd best defensive lineman on his team, but it was the best defense ever. But being considered not quite as good as Alan Page and Carl Eller does not eliminate a player from induction. If it did, the hall would be almost empty. 127 sacks, the career leader in fumble recoveries, and he was outstanding against the run. I saw a video once in which Len Dawson was dissing Marshall in the Hall of Fame conversation. He talked about that side of the Vikings D-line being easy to run on. The Chiefs faced the Marshall-led Vikings twice after that Super Bowl and lost 27-10 and 35-15, and they rushed for 73 yards a game. In other words, he had about the same amount of success as everyone else did. Jim Marshall belongs in the Hall of Fame. It's a terrible oversight, and I really hope that it gets corrected in the very near future. My next project will be to name the greatest quarterbacks of all time. It will not be judged strictly by passing yards or touchdowns or Super Bowl wins. It'll have all those things plus much, much more, including how much a quarterback stood out during his era. It's going to take a great deal of time and effort, so it might not be ready until the spring of 2021, but hopefully it'll be worth the wait. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would like to see more football videos, including my upcoming study of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.